Got a Bruce Springsteen song coming up that you've probably forgotten about. At number 27, up from number 30 on my fancy playlist, November 29th, 1986, Bruce Springsteen with his incendiary, well, with his version of War, the classic, the Motown classic, song War by Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band back in 1986 on my fancy playlist. How about that? Love the footage, the Vietnam footage, and uh, well, anyway, let's go back to the original version of War. It was done by Edwin Starr, but the Temptations actually cut that song first. Now let's go back even further than that. The song War, and I love this part. War was written by Norman Whitfield and Barrett Strong of Motown. Norman Whitfield was one of the prime songwriters, and Barrett Strong, one of the prime songwriters of Motown back in the late 60s. Norman Whitfield was producing hit records by the Temptations in the late 60s. Psychedelic Shack and Cloud 9. Papa was a Rolling Stone, Just My Imagination, Ball of Confusion, all of them produced by Norman Whitfield. Norman Whitfield and Gordon and Barrett Strong also wrote I Heard It Through the Grapevine, which was covered by Gladys Knight and the Pips. Then it was later done by Marvin Gaye. And these guys were just, it was, I read about Norman Whitfield. He kind of fascinates me for some reason. I read a good book about Motown some years ago and mentioned Norman Whitfield. And I remember reading that book with a great deal of admiration for Norman Whitfield. He also produced Car Wash later on by Rolls Royce, and that was back in Rolls Royce rather, but that was back in 1976. And now here's the thing: they wrote the song War, and they recorded the song with the Temptations. But there was a problem with the Temptations. You see, the Temptations, they did all these love songs like My Girl. They had My Girl. And even though they were doing some psychedelic stuff in the late 60s, Motown was kind of reluctant to release the Temptations version of War because they were afraid that they would alienate some of the Temptations' more conservative fans. Therefore, Edwin Starr, a second-tier Motown artist. And this is interesting about Edwin Starr. Edwin Starr was not originally with the Motown label. Edwin Starr was with the Rick Tick label, which was absorbed by Motown. It was absorbed by Motown in 1960. Gosh, I forgot the year. Around 66, 67, and he had one big hit with Motown before he recorded War. And Edwin Starr, it was 25 Miles by Edwin Starr. He was just a James Brown soul shouter type fellow. And he offered to do War. And Norman Whitfield re-recorded Edwin Starr's version of War. And Edwin Starr, it was definitely incendiary. I mean, this this is probably one of the most intense songs that ever came out. The Vietnam War was still raging in the summer of 1970, although the troops were getting drawn down. But Nixon had expanded the war into Cambodia. There was some fighting in Laos as well, and there was a considerable amount of protest on the college campuses, and the song just fit the times. And then he came out with a song called Stop the War Now after that in 1971. Well, anyway, going back to Bruce Springsteen's version of War, here it is at number 27 on my fancy playlist. His version went to number 8 on Billboard's Hot 100. Got a double check on that. I didn't know it got that high. I thought maybe it went top 20. But keep in mind, Bruce Springsteen was so hot back in the mid-'80s that, anything he did would probably go top 10. So here's War by Bruce Springsteen, his version at number 27. Fantasy Playlist, November 29th, 1986.